All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Loss Grief Journey webinar. This is webinar number 3 in this series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about building a support system, such as therapy, peer support, support groups, and more. Please hold all questions until the end of the presentation, and you can pop those into the Q&A. This will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. So this webinar is hosted by the Center for Veterinary Social Work Services and the Center for Veterinary Social Work and Veterinary Social Work Services at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The vision for that is attending to the welfare of all species through excellence in global interprofessional practice. So, what is veterinary social work? If you have attended any of these before, you already know the answer. But for anyone that has not yet heard of that or is familiar with the concept, essentially, veterinary social work is caring for the human side anywhere there is a human-animal interaction. So, you can see the 4 quadrants here that really focus on those different areas of human-animal interactions. And really, veterinary social work is a collaboration between the College of Veterinary Medicine and the College of Social Work at the University of Tennessee. There are several different options for certificates. So I'm actually a student working on my Master of Science in Social Work, and I am adding the veterinary social work certificate while I am working on my master's. For anyone that already has a master's in social work or other mental health fields, you can add a post-grad certificate to that. And for those of you that are in the animal world, there is something for you as well. That is the Veterinary Human Support Certificate. And that is for those interested in learning a little bit more about veterinary social work and the human side of the equation. So just beware though, because if you start with that certificate, the veterinary human support certificate, you might end up like me, where you just needed to pursue your master's and keep learning because it really is a fantastic program. So when we think about social work, let's break this down before we add the word veterinary to it. Social work really is a field supporting individuals, families, communities, and societies. You can kind of see the different rings here. And we refer to this as micro, which is therapy for individuals and families, meso, which is groups and organizations within communities, and macro, which is large scale change through research and policy development to impact entire communities and populations. This webinar series would be considered meso social work, and we will be exploring several areas of the quadrants of veterinary social work. So like I said, I am a student. I am a current intern for the Veterinary Social Work Services department at the College of Veterinary Medicine at University of Tennessee. I come from the animal world. Like I said, I started with the Veterinary Human Support Certificate. I've worked in zoos and aquariums. I have worked in shelters at animal hospitals. I'm a dog trainer, and I have these 3 lovely senior dogs, Noodles, Mona, and Wiley. So, um, that is my why, because I feel like I have that lived experience of being an animal caretaker in many facets and recognizing the significant need for additional mental health services for this population. And that is all of you watching tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about building a support system. So here are some of the topics that we're going to be covering. So, the first thing I wanted to touch on before we dive in to the actual support system is recognizing the power that we each have in adjusting or changing our own grief journey. What influences that? Things like your loss history. So, all of your previous losses and experiences that you have gone through can either help or maybe harm how you grieve an animal today. A helpful exercise in the Grief Recovery Handbook is to write down your loss history in chronological order. You can do that for animals only or include human losses as well for a broader picture. But that can kind of help you start to understand the losses you've gone through, which might be more significant than others, and really kind of just helping to paint that picture in a real way. Losing a loved one is one of the most stressful times in our lives. When we are in that high stress state, if you remember back to webinar one, we are talking about brain state. So, brain state five, when we're very stressed out, we're not thinking clearly, we're unable to regulate our emotions or really problem solve. We're in that flight, fight, freeze state. And it often feels like we have no choice and control over what happens next, or what is happening to us. But we do. We get to decide what our grief journey will look like because we are in the driver's seat. In the next few slides, we'll explore how our grief journey started and where it can go. So, just like I talked about previously, about how active listening needs to be modeled for us growing up in order to really understand and be able to practice that concept, it's the same thing for grief. So we learn so much from the adults in our lives and how they react, how they work through situations, including grief. So depending on what you observed with the adults in your life, you started to form your own frame of reference for what grief should look like. On the left are some maybe non-supportive examples. So if there was suppression and not talking about it, um, not being able to ask for help when they're clearly struggling, and also feeling like grief just isn't normal, and not really accepting some of those feelings or emotions that they're going through. On the flip side, on that right-hand side, there's some examples of healthy grieving. So kind of the opposite of some of those non-supportive examples. So just taking a look at these and thinking for yourself, what was your experience growing up? How was grief modeled for you? So then building on that, the good news is that regardless of what was modeled surrounding grief and many other behaviors, growing up, you do have the ability to change and evolve. It just takes the desire to grow and the effort to learn new patterns towards healing. Think now about your experience as an adult. What have you done differently from what was modeled for you? So you might already have helped to change and edit some of those experiences, which is fantastic. The other thing I think is really important to highlight is that we have the absolute pleasure of having strong relationships with animals in whatever capacity that you do in your life. We can learn from them. We love our animals for so many reasons: their personality, their companionship, their ability to live in the present moment, their unconditional love. These are all wonderful virtues to live by. Think for a minute about an animal you've had to say goodbye to. What would they want for you? What would they say to you? By growing through your grief and building your support system, you can honor your animal in a beautiful way. Next, we'll discuss several options for your support system. One example of supporting yourself through grieving is an animal is therapy. There are title protected professions, meaning someone cannot just say they are a social worker or a therapist. So when we're talking about therapy, that really is working with a clinician. That's a lot of work. There's typically a master's involved, as well as hundreds to thousands of hours practicing being a therapist under the guidance of someone who is already carrying that licensure. Um, and a lot of times even a competency test after that. So here's just a couple examples of licensed clinicians. If you feel like this is going to be helpful for you in your grief journey, then the next question is, well, how the heck do I find one? So there's employee assistance programs through work, maybe your health insurance. If you're working with an animal hospital or you're at an institution, they might have a clinician for you, maybe even a veterinary social worker. And we at UT actually have our Veterinary Social Work Services helpline. So one of our goals is to try to help connect people that are going to be helpful for them. So you can always give us a call and we can help you in your search. Something that is important to understand anytime you are looking for a therapist is that currently and legally, you're only allowed to work with a clinician who is licensed in the state that you live in. There are several compacts on the horizon in the works to help expand access to care, meaning that if you're licensed in one state, whoever else is in that compact would still be able to work with you, even if you're only licensed in one state. So that is on the horizon for a lot of those clinicians, but not quite there yet. Also contacting either your institution or animal hospital, or other resources. They might have a resource list. Maybe there are some kind of go-to clinicians in your area that they can help point you to. There's not currently a directory that lists all clinicians with training in veterinary social work or human animal interactions, but anyone can call the UT Vet Social Work Hotline and we will help connect you to someone that can be helpful for you. Another option for building your support system is peer support. So, a peer supporter might be someone that has additional training in something like pet loss grief, bereavement, grief coach, a death doula, something like that. Maybe they have lived experience, or maybe whatever company that they are working for or volunteering for has an in-house training. So, some companies, just like such as Not One More Vets, train their volunteers to support others as a peer. Additionally, a peer might not have any formal training. And again, that lived experience can be helpful. Just understanding that a peer supporter is not a licensed clinician. That does at least open up the opportunity to work with people in other states, sometimes even countries. But just also understanding that they don't have the same schooling or expertise as a clinician does. In many cases, virtual peer support is very popular for this reason, because you can work with people in different states and different countries. But there are some options for in person. So next, I'm just going to go through a couple examples of peer support. So one fantastic one is 988. There might be some people that are watching that have used this lifeline before. So there is 24/7 access to peers and clinicians. And really, they're there if you need brief support during a crisis. That could be mental health struggles, emotional distress, which I feel like grief and grieving a pet or an animal definitely falls under that. Any substance use concerns, or if you just need someone to talk to. It is a national network of crisis centers. And regardless if you are feeling suicidal or not, they always will check in with you about your risk for suicide or harming yourself or others. And they have all these different ways that you can speak with someone, whether it's a phone call, text message, even on your computer, you can do a web browser chat as well. And they range from trained peer supporters to sometimes licensed clinicians. So there's a variety of people that are assisting with these types of crisis centers that 988 goes to. And they are also able to help provide support in the moment, but also connect you to other resources like therapists, mental health centers, and things like that. Another example of peer support specific for veterinary professionals is Not One More Vet. So they have a couple different options there. So they do have their veterinary mental health support, uh, which is free, as is Lifeboat. Lifeboat is an anonymous peer-to-peer chat-based support platform for members of the veterinary community. And they also have online forums as well, one specifically for veterinarians, one specifically for veterinary professionals, which includes vet techs, assistants, customer service representatives, etc. An example of peer support for animal owners is Lap of Love. It's a national in-home euthanasia and hospice company, but they really do understand the strength of the human-animal bond and have built some amazing human support services into their business. So they do have sessions with grief counselors that are paid. And they also have an online forum as well. They also do have support groups, which we'll talk about, but they have a couple different options. So the one-on-one, the peer support, as well as those support groups. So they do have some free general support groups as well as low-cost specialty support groups. And then for zoo and aquarium workers, there is GRAY. So that is growing resiliency for aquarium and zoo employees. And they specifically started to support anyone in the zoo and aquarium world with mental health. So they do have sessions available one-on-one with specially trained peers that are low cost as well. Next, let's talk about support groups. And for this context, again, just defining that support groups, usually for animal loss grief, are typically not intended for therapy and do not have to be led by a clinician. So there are therapy support groups, and then what we'll be talking about today is more of those peer support groups. So during the COVID pandemic, many in-person pet loss support groups had to become virtual just out of necessity. Many continue to run virtually in order to increase the ability to reach and help more people. As we discussed, animal loss is an example of disenfranchised grief, where the general population doesn't readily acknowledge it. This can increase feelings of isolation for anyone who has lost an animal in any capacity. So, a support group helps to bring people together to share their stories and feelings in a safe space. This can help promote healing and decrease feelings of isolation by building community with others. So a couple examples of support groups. So at UT, we have the Veterinary Social Work Services Animal Loss Support Group. That is a free monthly virtual offering, and it is open to anybody. For veterinary professionals, Veterinary Hope Foundation is a nonprofit that focuses on support groups. And there are different ways to run support groups. So what we run for Veterinary Social Work Services currently is what we consider open. So it can be different people every meeting, just come when you can, versus what Veterinary Hope Foundation does is a little bit different of a structure. So they have the same 8 people meet once a week for 6 weeks. So a little bit different feel, but then you're able to build a little bit more depth of that community feeling because you're working with the same people. And they do rotate the focus of their groups throughout the year. So sometimes it's for veterinarians that are also parents, maybe veterinary team members, which includes vet tech support team members, non-veterinarian leadership roles. Sometimes they have support groups for veterinary professionals in animal shelters, sometimes for veterinarians grieving their own pet, and more. So if you go to this website and you don't see something that resonates with you, there is an option to make a suggestion, and they are really fantastic at bringing a lot of those suggestions to fruition. Another support group is led by animal assisted therapy programs in Colorado. And this is for animal care workers. And this is great because we just need more support for animal care workers, especially in shelters. So this is for animal shelter workers, anyone that works in kennels. They also included zoo and veterinary workers as well. And just understanding that the preliminary research is showing that that similar to veterinary professionals, animal shelter staff also have high levels of compassion fatigue and burnout. So I was really excited to find this support group. So I know there are plenty other resources out there. So I just wanted to give kind of just different examples of ways that you can build your support group or build your support system around yourself. The other thing that we have talked about in this webinar series is that there is no timeline for grief. So whether it's been a week, a month, a year, or multiple years since you have lost an animal, you are welcome. in these spaces. And it's never too late to work on processing those emotions and that grief to help honor that amazing bond that you had with that animal. Also, on our website, there is a resource list that has animal loss grief resources, including books for adults, books for children, podcasts, a couple videos, shorter articles, and some of the resource that I'm sharing in this presentation as well. So make sure to check that out on the UT website. And that is vetsocialwork.utk.edu. I'll make sure to put that in the notes for the recording. So for our next webinar for April, that's going to be webinar number 4. And I'm going to be sharing ways that different cultures honor their deceased animals and share ideas and ways that you, your family, your team can memorialize the animals you love and miss. When you leave today's webinar, you will see a short 2-question survey. I'm hoping to gather details about ways you have memorialized animals in the past and give you the opportunity to ask questions and give me some things that I might even be able to incorporate into next month's presentation. Awesome. So thank you, everyone. So I'm going to stop the recording if I can find the button. There we go.